to let there be a little bit of, I call it space to fail, a little bit of space to fail, where
Mm-hmm.
you do your part, and maybe it's 10 slides and you make four of them. And there's six blank slides, and you send it. Hey guys, here's the deck that we've been working on. And somebody
Yeah.
goes, well, why are the first six slides blank? Go, oh, unfortunately, those are supposed to be done by Clark. I just assumed he'd be sending those separately. Clark, did you have an update on those slides?
Yeah.
But
I
people
love
don't want
doing
to do
that
that.
actually.
People don't want to do it because it's uncomfy, right? To be like,
Yeah.
here's blank slides from Clark. Um, but the benefit is when you do that, then everybody goes, Clark, what the hell?
Yeah.
Where's your stuff? Instead of Kendall doing the work for him, and then everybody goes, you guys did a great job. And silently, Kendall's so mad inside because Clark didn't do
That's right.
anything, right? So
Mhm.
that's like one last thing is in the right project, in the right environment, with the right audience, right? Don't have something go to your CEO with blank
That's right.
slides.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
be
yeah, of
stupid.
course. Yes.
Don't be stupid. Use some good judgment. The
Yeah. Kendall, I've been wondering, right? Somebody who's 30, been 5, 8 years on the corporate ladder, trying to struggle through their way, right? What's one mistake that they're probably making and they're not even realizing it?
they're not educating their leadership. So I feel like, especially when you're starting out in your career, we have this assumption that our boss knows what we're doing. They know how complicated it is. They know why it's important. They know what stakeholders we're working with. We
Mhm.
believe that they know everything about our job because they're assigning tasks to us. And the
Mhm.
reality is that they don't. Many managers will forget they asked you to do anything right after they ask you. And they're
Okay.
not thinking through, okay, what all are they going to have to do? Who all are they going to have to talk to? What are they going to have to execute? They're not thinking that far ahead. And so when you're in that, 5, 8 years into your career, you're probably upper individual contributor or moving into management,
Mhm.
you think that they're aware. And the problem is because they aren't, they
Mhm.
don't know how to advocate for you. They don't know how to get you promoted. They don't know how to talk about you to their peers or to their boss. And so as
Okay.
a result, a lot of people get stuck right there and they don't understand. They think, but I'm so hardworking and I'm getting all this stuff done and I do everything my boss asks me to, and they don't seem to care. And it's because their boss doesn't understand the complexity. And so if you're at that stage in your career, your job is to educate. Hey, I'd love to do that. Here's what that takes. Or, hey, I just executed this work. Here's the impact. Here's who I worked with. Here's how complicated it was. Here's why it took so long. And if you're educating your leadership on why things are important, you're making their job much easier because they can then talk about it as if they know what was going on. But they
Mhm.
can also advocate for you. They can get you promoted. They can get you on good projects. They can talk to your betterment in
Mhm.
a way that they can't when you're just out working really hard and doing all the things you're supposed to do, but not informing them the importance of it all.
Okay. Just to make things, put things in perspective, right? I want to understand how is it different from from it being early in your career where you're still, I mean, if you want to stand out, you want to let your manager know what you're doing about, right? What you've been
Mhm.
doing, and then you're not a very senior person who has like 10 people looking at the impact that you're creating, and you're somewhere in between, but you still have to tell people that this is what I'm working on. So how has must the perspective change?
So I think as you get more senior, you actually get less support.
Mhm.
So when you become a director or you become a VP or you become a head of, nobody's telling you what to do anymore.
Yeah,
They expect you know what to do.
that's
And
right.
they're going to leave you to do your job because they don't want to think about it at all. So
Yeah.
when you're younger and more junior in your career, your boss is saying, hey, build this widget,
Mhm.
get it to me by this date. And it's important that you say, hey, I built the widget. Here's how it works. Here's why it's really important. Here's who I worked with to create it, right? All of that for that self advocacy. But then as you become a director or a VP, your boss goes, do your job.
Mhm.
And that's all you get. And so at that point, it's still about educating, but it's about educating the strategy,
Mhm.
educating the vision, educating the direction more so than the widgets. And this is why a lot of people get stuck. I think the two hardest jumps to make in your whole career are from individual contributor to managing people,
Mhm.
because everybody goes, but you've never managed people, so we don't know if you can do it. And you go,
Yeah.
well, how will I manage people if you won't promote me into a role where I can manage people, right?
Yeah.
That's a big jump. And
Mhm.
then that like director, senior director jump is really
Okay.
challenging because it goes from, are you doing your job, to can you lead an organization
Mm-hmm.
in a direction it's going to benefit the company, keep everybody motivated, and manage people you're not spending time with. Because at that point, you have people who are two, three, four levels
Mm-hmm.
below you that you're not actually seeing, but they need to be
Yeah.
executing as well. So
Mm-hmm.
as you progress through your career, the more senior you become, the education doesn't stop. It
Yeah.
just changes into here's where my organization's going. Here's why we need people. Here's how we're using those people to deliver benefits for the company. And your job becomes more of that business case. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
pay me a really high salary. And in exchange, I'm going to get you all this ROI within my team. Right.
Right.
Whereas as an individual contributor, you're like, you pay me, so I make widgets. Here's my widgets. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that you have to be able to evolve your communication over time so
Mm-hmm.
that your leadership continues to get clarity regarding your specific job, whether you are junior or you are more senior.
Okay. So when we're trying to do this communication, right, be it mid-management or senior leadership, right, there's obviously a framework that we have to follow. We have to say, talk about impact and stuff like that. Okay. We have to be very specific, say using the SMART framework or something of that sort, right, while
Mhm.
creating goals or while trying to communicate the impact. Anything specific that you like and say this is something that should very specifically be done?
Think of what would not have happened if you had not done your job. A lot of the time, we think about our job.
Mm-hmm.
I made widget A. Yay, right? And that's what we go to our boss. We're like, I made that widget you asked for. Here you go. If you think instead, hey, if I had not done my job, if I had not made widget A, what
Mm-hmm.
would not have happened? We would not have been able to close that customer sale
Mm-hmm.
because they were asking for widget A and that was part of their contract was contingent on this execution. Or we
Mm-hmm.
would have not been able to deliver this broader initiative that widget A plugs into, or we would not have had insights into this part of the organization, or we would not
Mm-hmm.
have been able to launch that marketing campaign, which led to X million dollars in revenue. Stop thinking about your job and start thinking about what would not have happened if you hadn't done your job. And then
Okay.
when you talk about your work that way, it's so much easier to articulate your impact,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm an individual who worked for me. It's their first time managing people. And I remember the first time I asked him to have his team do something. I was like, hey, I want your team to do this. He's like, yeah, I can get them together. I can run this org. And I was like, no, no, no. I don't want you to do anything. I
Okay.
want your team to do it. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, but then what did I do? And I was like, well, if you don't manage them well, none of this happens. It's not
Right.
about your job. It's
Yeah.
about what does not happen if you don't do your job. I was like, stop thinking about being the person who delivers the work. Be the person who ensures the work can be delivered and change your mindset. And the first time he had a big project go live in his team, he was like, oh, you're right. This is awesome. Like, they did a great job. I answered questions. I facilitated. I coached. I cleared roadblocks. I did all the things managers are supposed to do. I didn't do the work, but it would not have happened if I hadn't done my job. And so I think that's the big reframe as your career progresses.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from doing the work to what would not have happened without you. And I think this is why, quick side note, I think executives get a bad reputation. They're like, why is the CEO making $5 million dollars and the
Yeah.
developer's making 60, right?
Yeah.
And there are some companies where your CEO sucks, and I get that. I do. But I think a lot of the time,
Yeah.
that CEO is facilitating so much, right? They're keeping the board or the shareholders at bay. They're dealing with investor relations. They're dealing with PR. They're giving interviews. And they're coaching a leadership team. Hey, you all need to have a strategy. We're all moving in this
Mm-hmm.
direction. Here's the goals of the company. How do I clear roadblocks for you? How do I source funding for you? And so if you put a CEO's job in terms of what would not have happened if you hadn't been in your role,
Mm-hmm.
their salary makes a bit more sense. Now, I've worked in jobs where I saved the company $100 million dollars and nobody paid me $100 million dollars. So there's still a little bit of like balance there. But
Yeah.
I do think that when you're creating goals, if you're following a SMART framework,
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, or any kind of structure, the flip side of that is okay. if I had just not shown up, if I had not done my job, or if I'd not done it well,
Mm-hmm.
what would not have happened? And then spin that into how you talk about it. I facilitated the execution of this huge project because I delivered my widget. I delivered on this strategy because
Mm-hmm.
of my widget. I helped drive revenue. I decreased risk. Think of those types of impacts rather than you asked me for A, I did A,
Mm-hmm.
done. That's what really helps elevate your thinking too, because part of this is communication, part of this is how do you tell your boss, but part of this is how do you start to display that thought process, that strategic thinking
Mm-hmm.
that's going to turn you into a director, it's going to turn you into an executive. And
Yeah.
that thought process is not just your job, it's all of those impacts that come from it.
I mean, I definitely concur with what you're saying, but there's also one thing I want to add is that when you think like that, it also changes the way you work, right? The
Hmm.
thought process of doing the job itself, whatever you've been told to do, if you flip the story of towards the impact that you're creating, you have more value towards the work that you're doing, or probably have put more effort probably at some point of time, because you'll see the results, visualize the results per se, and then think about, oh, there's so much value that I'm going to be adding, so I'd rather put a little more effort probably, and
It
then
also helps you deprioritize unimportant things,
yeah.
right? If you're thinking about the impact and your boss goes, hey, can you build widget B? And you can't think of any impact,
Mhm.
widget B is not a good use of your time,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then the conversation becomes, hey, what's the context behind why we need widget B? Like, I'm happy to build it, I'm capable of building it, but
Mhm.
I want to understand the why behind it because I think if we spent time focusing on widget A, that drives this impact. And I just want to make sure that's the right trade-off. And then your boss goes, oh, no, you're right. Widget A would be much better. Let's focus our energy there. Or they give you some context for widget B that you didn't know. And you're like, oh, now it makes sense why that's so important. So I 1,000% agree with you. It helps motivate you and keep you focused, but it also helps you let go of all the dumb stuff that you're like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah. That's
that
true.
does nothing. That doesn't even help us at all. Why am I wasting
Mhm.
my energy there?
Yeah. Now, sometimes people are just stuck. Now, obviously, we talked about educating leadership, right?
Mhm.
But as you mentioned, some people are just stuck with CEOs, which feel like, why are
Yep.
they CEOs in the first place? But sometimes, quite a lot of times, actually, not sometimes, they're stuck with managers who feel like, why are they even managers, right? So, how do you educate or manage such a manager, if I can put it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so this is the number one reason that people leave a job is
That's
because
right.
of their boss.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not because of money. It's not because of opportunity. It's because of boss. Now, there are times where you leave a job because of money. Don't get me
yeah.
wrong, but mostly it's the boss. So I'm gonna try and keep this relatively short because there's a lot that we can do when we have a
Yeah,
bad
I
boss.
know. It's,
Um, but the number one thing to keep in mind is your boss does not determine your promotions or progression alone. And this
mm,
is a big thing that I don't feel people understand. Yes, your boss can go into a room and say, I think Aditya is great. He should get promoted. They
mhm.
can do that, but they still don't make that decision by themselves. All of
That's
their
right.
peers are going to weigh in, and
Yeah.
their boss is going to weigh in, and their boss's boss is going to weigh in. So
Mhm.
if you have a boss who maybe you're not their favorite person. Maybe you
Mhm.
guys don't communicate the same way. Maybe they're a
Mhm.
micromanager. Maybe they steal credit, right? Pick a toxic boss stereotype.
Personality, yeah.
Yes. You need to build relationships with other people.
Uh-huh.
Build relationships with your boss's peers. Build relationships with your boss's boss. Build a relationship with that VP stakeholder who's on all of the project meetings you're on. Maybe they're
Mhm.
not in your org, but they're really senior. Because when promotion conversations happen, they usually happen in what's called a cross-calibration. So
Yeah.
um, 90% of companies do promotions this way. They get all of whatever seniority level, let's say it's directors and above, they get all the directors in a room and they say, okay, let's compare Kendall and Aditya and let's see who do we like better,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
They say
that's
it
right.
nicer than
Yeah.
that because it's corporate, but that's the gist. And they go,
Yeah.
well, Kendall delivered XYZ and Aditya did XYZ. And they're kind of similar. They go,
Mhm.
okay, well, then let's compare John. And they're like, oh, well, John, way better,
Yeah.
killed it. And they go, cool, should John get promoted? That's how the conversation happens, is they're talking about everybody in this big group
Yeah.
setting and they're comparing them to one another, saying, is Kendall better than John? And then if there is somebody where they're like, oh, well, he's amazing. Then
Mhm.
they're like, well, should John get promoted? So the reason this is important is if you don't get along with your boss, you want every other voice in that room to
To talk
go,
about you, yeah.
Kendall's awesome. Kendall should totally get promoted. Kendall's great. Because then
Yeah.
it puts your boss in an awkward position where your boss can't be the only one who's like, no, I don't like her,
Mhm.
right? Then it looks really
Yeah.
bad on your boss. So the number one thing you can do when you have a difficult boss is make relationships with other people. And that's important for
Yeah.
cross calibrations in your progression. But it's also important because if you do like your company, you may want to move internally. And the
Mhm.
more people you know internally, the easier it is to move to another
That's
team
right.
and keep your
Hmm.
tenure, your seniority, your salary, all those types of things. So that's the number one thing if you have a bad boss. The second thing is I like to ask the bosses with whom I struggle or my clients struggle the question, what are your expectations of me
Hmm.
in this role? What are your expectations of me in this project? What are your expectations of me in this meeting?
Hmm.
That question, a lot of the time, if your boss is like, well, I expect you to do this and this and this and this, and you're like, oh my God, I did not expect any of that
Uh-huh.
from me. I didn't realize you had all these expectations. It helps us understand, why are they acting that way? Why are they being difficult? Why don't they like us? Why don't they promote us? Why don't they support us? And we're like, oh, well, I'm not doing anything they thought I was supposed to be doing. That makes sense
Mhm.
then. The problem is most bosses don't know how to articulate that. They don't know how to tell you where you're struggling. They want to be the nice guy. They don't want you to be upset. They don't want to hurt your feelings.
Mhm.
And so instead, they just cut you out, or they don't give you big projects, or they don't give you credit for things, and they never tell you why. So understanding their expectations and what you can do, what you have control and autonomy over to improve in order to improve their perspective of you is also really important. And then the last thing that I'll say is figure out your boss's communication preference. One of the best compliments that I ever got in my entire career is I had an executive, and he said, "You're like Jean Grey from X-Men. You like read my mind before I know I need something. It's already in my email box."
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, "Thank you." It's like such a weird way to
Yeah.
describe me, but I'll take it. But what I found was I could anticipate,
Hmm.
oh, this is his preferred communication style. He's
Hmm.
not going to tell me this is coming down the pipe. I need to go to so and figure out what's next. And then I need to
Hmm.
prep it so that by the time he asks me, I already have it ready. And being able to anticipate what your boss prefers and what they like and what they need is really, really helpful in improving a negative relationship because a lot of the time, your boss just doesn't want to have to tell you what to do. As I mentioned at the start, like the more senior you get, the less your boss is going to tell you what to do.
Yes.
They're going to expect you to figure it out on your own. And so the more proactive you can be to say, okay, well, they keep complaining about this problem. I'm just going to go fix that problem and bring them some solutions and see how it goes and try to be more proactive is the last thing. But you could do all three of the things I mentioned, and your boss could still suck. And
Yeah.
that's when you decide to leave, right? That's when you go find another job. That's when you go to the job market. That's when you use that network you've built for an internal transfer, right? Not
Uh-huh.
every boss is going to become a great boss, no matter how great of an employee you are.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
what I tell my clients is always give your boss and your company the opportunity to do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
Make the effort, ask the question, what are your expectations of me? Take ownership, be proactive, build your network. And then if none of it works, you go, okay, well, you're terrible. And then you leave and you go somewhere else. And quick example on this, I had a client who's worked with me for years, wonderful, wonderful guy. And he moved to the US. So he's got a different cultural background, was navigating it, boss from a different cultural background. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
a lot of tension. And we did these things. We built this really robust network. We started asking what your expectations were of me. We got really proactive. We started solving all those problems. He called me maybe 2 months ago and he was like, you'll never believe it. He got fired. And I was like, yeah, yay, great. Why? And he goes, everybody started to see that I was the one doing the work and I was the one being proactive and I was the one showing up to the meetings and they let him go. And I never want anybody to get fired, but you're like,
Yeah.
sweet, like it worked, right?
Yeah.
Like it people saw you and they saw your productivity, they saw your relationship
Hmm.
building, and they gave you credit for that. And that's the ideal outcome. But had it not gone that way, he would have been one of those clients where I was like, okay, it's time for us to leave. Like we've done everything we can, time
Yeah.
to move on. So if you find yourself in that position, you're like, I'm trying so hard, it's not working, I just need to leave, then leave. Like nobody's going to judge you for that.
Mhm. Okay, and yeah, just that it's a system, right? And like most systems that are there, you have to find a way to game it, right? If you want to call it that. Uh,
Yep.
and if there's, I don't know, should I ask something? I mean, as vague as that, if there's one rule that you want to break in that system, what rule would that be if you can legally break it?
Oh, gosh. So the career game is really complicated because it's undocumented,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
What makes the career game a game is nobody tells you. They're just like, work on your communication, your executive presence, your strategic thinking.
Yeah.
They use these really vague, nebulous
That's
terms, and
right.
they're like, be better. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? And honestly, that's why I got into what I do now, why I wrote my book, Secrets of the Career Game, was because I was like, this is nuts. Nobody's telling you how to do these things, but there's a way to navigate it. Now, I will say if there was a rule I could break or something culturally I could make go away, for me, it's the subterfuge. And I think that's why the corporate game gets a bad reputation, is there's always, in every company I've ever worked in, at least two or three people who
Hmm.
are lying, they're manipulative,
Uh-huh.
they'll steal credit for your work, they'll go behind your back. And those people, that subterfuge, usually short term is rewarded
Hmm.
because they look really great and they get all this credit and they deliver all of this work and they make it look so great to their
Yeah.
boss that they get promoted for it or they get more credit or you're seen as not a good employee while they're seen as excellent. And long term, usually that gets found out. Like
Okay.
usually at some point a boss will come in the organization and be like, "Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You're saying Susie did all of this? What about the rest of the org?" Like there's no way that it's just one person, right?
Yeah.
But short term, it gets rewarded. So I think for me, if I could like overhaul the corporate system, I think putting in a mechanism for true anonymous feedback
Hmm.
solves that in a lot of ways, right? Like truly being able to go to an HR or an equivalent and be like, hey, my boss sucks. Like being able to do that and not get fired
Yeah.
would be really great. But the way the system is built today, I tell my clients, and I hate to be this person, I always say, do not go to HR
Hmm.
unless you have a lot of proof of something that is legitimately illegal, like they're
Hmm.
being sexist, ageist, homophobic, whatever it is, and you've got documentation to prove it, then of course go to HR, right? But in the absence of that, like your boss is mean, your boss is rude, your boss plays favorites, tough. They're not going to do anything about that. And so I do think that creating that anonymous response
Hmm.
would be really helpful for a lot of companies. But we always kind of fail to execute, right? Because somebody knows who wrote it. And then they're like, well, Susie, man, she keeps filing all these complaints, right? So, and there's bad
Yeah.
eggs on both sides. There's people who file complaints that aren't true too, which is why due diligence is important in all of these things. So I think that would be for me as like if I could break part of the corporate system, I
Hmm.
wish that like, subterfuge didn't get rewarded. Um, but I don't know that there's a perfect way to solve that. It's like
Yeah.
the shopping cart problem. Not everybody's going to put away their shopping cart even though they know they should. And so I don't
Yeah.
know that you can solve that people problem in corporate, but that would be my big one because I mean I've experienced it. I tell this story on podcasts a lot. My first job out of college. So I graduated college early. I was 19 when I
Hmm.
graduated. My first job, I'm 20, so I'm a baby. And I was giving a presentation to the executive team, which we could get into a whole story about why the heck a 19-year-old was presenting to the executive team. But I had a great boss and a cool opportunity. It was a really interesting job. And we got a new VP. And halfway through my presentation, he goes, "You look like you should be dancing on the table instead of sitting at it,"
Okay.
in the middle of my presentation. And I was
Hmm.
like, Anyways, if you look at column G, and I just like went back, I
Yeah.
had no idea how to respond, right? And that happens all the time to everybody, right? Somebody makes a snide comment, or somebody treats somebody poorly, or, they devalue your work. Like it happens to everybody.
Mhm.
And that's the piece where I'm like, if I could just make that go away, if I could just not have people experience that, it would be great. Now, he did get
Yeah.
fired after
Okay.
that. It got back to my head of HR, and she came to my desk and was like, "You want to tell me what happened?" And I was like, "No, I don't.
Hmm.
No, I don't. You figure that out yourself." And she did, and he did get walked out. I had already quit at that point, but it was one of those situations where like that's the kind of stuff that I think gets corporate a bad reputation. Is it just takes one bad guy. Now I had worked there for 2 years, had great experience, but it
Hmm.
took one bad hire to really create that negative environment.
Hmm. That's true, right? But if there was a workaround around these subterfuges, right? Because
Mhm.
they actually exist in
Yep.
like 99.9% of the
Yep.
organizations, you can't get away from it. So,
Mhm.
what's been your workaround for this kind of colleague, if you want to call them?
Yep. Two things. One, that same network, right?
Yeah,
If you have 50 people who think you're great, then
yeah,
nobody believes Susie, or nobody believes John, or nobody, then they know that you have good quality, and
that's right.
that
Mhm.
protects you a lot. So good
Yeah.
network is number one. And number two is CYA, cover your
Hmm.
assets, which is basically document. If
Hmm.
you know this person is squirrely, they steal credit, they're not very nice, they manipulate conversations,
Hmm.
record your calls, write an email recap after. That's one of my favorites is like, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to meet with me. Here's what we talked about. Here's what you agreed to. Here's what I agreed to. Here's a note. I send a lot of meeting notes, like, hey,
Yeah.
this is how this chat went.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very useful. Yes.
yeah. And so having that documentation, and I had a client once ask me, they're like, yeah, but even if I have that documentation, that's not going to stop HR. I'm like, that's probably true. If it gets to the point where like HR gets involved, maybe they look at the documentation, maybe they don't, but it's helpful for your sanity. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
Mhm.
not crazy, right? This is what
Yeah.
we talked about. I'm not nuts, right? It's good to keep yourself grounded,
Yes.
but it's also good because something that I like to do when I know I'm working with somebody difficult, if I have a good relationship with my boss, or even a good relationship with like a mentor or coach, I will send them and say, hey, I just met with poor Susie in this example. Hey, I just met with Susie. Seems like we have some tension on some of the projects we're working on. We took some time to talk through it. Here's what she committed to, here's what I committed to. I think we've got a good direction forward, but I wanted to give you a heads up in case it comes back to you.
Right.
And people don't do this. They don't give their boss a heads up. They go, "Oh, I'm just going to solve it on my own. I don't want them to know I'm having difficulty. I don't want it to sound like I'm complaining about Susie. I don't want to." So we
Hmm.
don't tell our boss. And then what happens is Susie's like this to everybody in the break room. I hate Kendall. She's terrible. She's mean. She didn't do this thing. And then somebody takes it to your boss and goes, hey, Kendall's underperforming. And if your boss doesn't have a heads up,
Hmm.
then in that moment, your boss goes, wait, what happened? What are you talking about?
Hmm.
Oh gosh, did Kendall really mess that up? Right? They're not going to take your side because they don't know the context. They don't know what's going on. But if I've met with Susie and I have a recap email and I sent it to Susie and then I forward it to my boss and I say, hey, I met with Susie, wanted to let you know we've been having some tension. Here's what we agreed on. I'm taking it forward from here, but wanted you to have a heads up. And then somebody goes to your boss and goes, hey, I heard Kendall drop the ball. Your boss is going to be like, well, she met with Susie last week and Susie agreed to do these pieces. Did Kendall not do the other pieces? Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
Kendall showed them to me. I know she got them done. Then your boss can defend you, they can have your back, they can support you.
Hmm.
Um, and I always tell my team, I would rather you bring me a problem before it's a problem than wait until somebody else tells me and try and defend yourself. Because it just makes my job harder. I can't have your back if I don't know
Yeah,
what's going on.
that's right.
But if I know what's going on, I'm like
Yeah.
first out of the batting cage, like, sweet. They
Hmm.
they didn't do nothing wrong. It's you guys. So I think that's a big piece. If you are facing subterfuge, that difficult coworker, colleague, obviously we've already talked about what to do if that colleague is your boss, but if it's not your boss, really making sure you're documenting, you're giving your boss a heads up of different situations before they become escalations. Um, and then making sure that you're putting yourself in a position to do your job. And the last thing I'll say on this, I know this became kind of a long answer, is a lot of high performers, when we're working with somebody difficult, we do what I call the swoop and save.
Mhm.
Oh, Clark's not going to deliver that. I know he's not because he's a difficult coworker and he always takes credit for my work anyways. So I'm just going to do Clark's job. I'm going to
Mhm.
swoop in, save the day. I'm going to do Clark's job and then I'm going to deliver the product. And the issue with that is everybody loves Clark
Yeah.
because Clark's work got done and it looks great and it's fine. And it's better to let there be a little bit of, I call it space to fail, a little bit of space to fail, where
Hmm.
you do your part and maybe it's 10 slides and you make four of them. There's six blank slides and you send it. Hey guys, here's the deck that we've been working on. And somebody
Yeah.
goes, well, why are the first six slides blank? Go, oh, unfortunately, those are supposed to be done by Clark. I just assumed he'd be sending those separately. Clark, did you have an update on those slides?
Yeah.
But
I
people
love
don't want
doing
to do
that
that.
actually.
People don't want to do it because it's uncomfy, right? To be like,
Yeah.
here's blank slides from Clark. Um, but the benefit is when you do that, then everybody goes, Clark, what the hell?
Yeah.
Where's your stuff? Instead of Kendall doing the work for him, and then everybody goes, you guys did a great job. And silently, Kendall's so mad inside because Clark didn't do anything, right? So
Mhm.
that's like one last thing is in the right project, in the right environment, with the right audience, right? Don't have something go to your CEO with blank
That's right.
slides.
Yeah,
Don't be
yeah, of
stupid.
course. Yes.
Don't be stupid. Use some good judgment. But
Yeah.
leaving enough space for that person to not deliver
Uh-huh.
creates more pain. And then the organization goes, wait a minute, Clark, what you doing all day? Where's your stuff? As opposed to you swooping and saving, and then that problem never gets addressed. So, one quick side note on that as well.
Thank you so much, Kendall. This has been a fun conversation, if I could put it like that. Having this perspective from going from managers to co-workers. Lovely talking to you about this system that we need to game at some point in our lives, and because you have to climb this ladder, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
before I close, how can people know more about who you and what have you been doing?
Yeah, so I'm that career coach on all social media. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, come find me. Or thatcareercoach.net. I'm always posting free advice. I'm sharing a lot of information about how you can get ahead in your career. And then check out the book, Secrets of the Career Game. It's got everything we talked about today in it and a bunch more. And it lays out what are all these things we don't talk about that are actually causing all these problems? And then what do you do to solve it? So I appreciate you having me on the podcast. It was an excellent conversation.
Thank you so much, Kendall. Thanks once again for joining me on this episode of Your Lab Central. So, to the audience who's been listening and watching intently, if you liked what we talked about, do leave a like. The comment section is open for questions, comments, and perspectives. Anything you want to add? And yeah, if you've been listening this long, you should have subscribed a long while ago. Thank you so much for joining in. Thanks once again, Kendall, for this conversation. Thank you so much.